Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Kyra, and here on this channel, we love makeup. But we're looking for real makeup for real life and real people. Today's video, as you would have seen by the title, is all about ranking all of the palettes that I tried this year, and I have to admit I was kind of surprised by the number of palettes that I bought this year, and not that it was high, but it was actually pretty low. The Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette, which I just purchased but haven't used thanks to 1 Month 1 Palette, was my 12th palette that I bought this year. And while that sounds like a lot to some people, for me as someone that creates YouTube content as well as someone whose favorite category is eyeshadow, that isn't a lot for me. So the other thing I wanted to make mention of is that 2 of the 12 palettes I have not used yet, so I won't be ranking them today, but I will show them to you real quick before we get started. Like I said, I did get the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette in the sale, and I am so excited to dive into this. I did swatch it after taking some pictures, but I've not put any of this on my eyeballs because I am committed to my 1 Month 1 palette with the Jackie Aina palette from ABH, so I did get this one but haven't used it. And then the other one that I have purchased recently, right before the Rose Quartz from Huda Beauty, is the Flower Beauty Desert Lights palette. And boy, is this beautiful. I'm glad that I waited and I ended up getting this one and not the Jungle Lights palette. I do feel like I'll use all of the shades in here. I did not feel that way about the Jungle Lights, so I'll be very excited to get into that. If you have any requests on how I bring you my reviews on those palettes in terms of the numbers of looks, etc., let me know down in the comments, and let's get started with the ranking. Now keep in mind we're ranking 10 palettes here, and I actually love them all. Some I've gotten to use more than others, and some just have to fall at the bottom. That's the nature of ranking, but it doesn't mean that I don't like the palette. So starting out with number 10, this was actually the very first palette that I purchased this year, and I used a combination of points as well as my birthday discount at Ulta to purchase it, and that is the Nomad by Juvia's Place. You would have seen me mention this palette in my favorite palettes for fall, I believe, and this is definitely a palette that screams fall to me, but I also just love these tones. Now, I could just as soon let go of the Big Bird Yellow here, but other than that, I love all of the shades in here. I especially love this shimmer shade right here. It's just absolutely gorgeous and smooth and buttery. So coming in at number 10. Number 9, another palette that I absolutely adore, and I am working on panning a couple of shades in here, so I'd pop them back in the palette, and that is the ColourPop off Melrose palette. I really enjoy this palette. I'm working on hitting pan in the shade Easy Breezy as well as Angelino. Also, this orange did not come in the palette. There was a pressed glitter here, which I threw away because I don't use them, and then I just popped this fun orangey creamsicle shade in here. I just thought it would be fun with some of the other tones. But I really love this. It has some great staple neutrals in here, but it also has some really beautiful shimmer shades, which, you know, we all know that I love. I love this duochrome right here called Fairfax. And for me, this is just like my perfect kind of neutral palette. You have your great standard neutrals in here, but you also have some fun while still staying pretty toned down. Even the duochrome is pretty toned down. So all in all, I really love this palette. I'm glad that I purchased it, even though it's kind of irrelevant because ColourPop likes to discontinue things so quickly. But again, I like it. Number 8 is the BH Cosmetics Blueberry Muffin palette. I really enjoy this palette. I definitely think I would like to do a 1 month, one palette maybe at some point with this one, just so that I can get a feel for it more, as well as get some really good use out of it. I feel like when I did my very first 1 month, one palette with the BH Avocado Toast palette, and that one is coming, I just grew to love the palette even more. And I'm hoping it'll be the case with this one. I do love blue eyeshadow and I do love the tones in here. I just sometimes when I look at this, I don't always see a look right away looking into the palette. But you do have, you know, some really beautiful neutrals in here, as well as some of the most beautiful shimmer lid shades that I have ever seen. They're just really stunning. I love this formula in these square palettes from BH, whether it's these, which I believe came from the brunch collection, or the travel collection. I have a couple of those as well. I think this is really a fun palette, and if you're looking to just sort of dip your toe into blue, I think this is a good way to do it because it's not all that blue. Number 7 is the palette that I bought for myself with my very first YouTube Google paycheck, and that is my Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. I know you might be surprised to see it ranked at number 7, but for me, I think it's because it is quite a specific color story for me. I really see mostly fall looks and summer looks in here. There's nothing at all wrong with the palette. That is not what I'm saying here. It's just that it's not something that I feel inclined to reach for at any time of the year. I might reach into here for a shade or two. I do like how many cream to powder shadows are in this palette. It is my favorite formula from Natasha Denona, and so I'm thankful for that. There's some really beautiful greens in here, which I also love. So this is a great palette. It's just a little bit more of a specific color story that I'm inclined to wear at a specific time of year versus some other more neutral palettes or palettes that have a different variety of shades in there that I feel like I can use more often. Number 6 is a big old palette. I didn't think I would add this to my collection this year, and then I did. It is the ABH Norvina Volume 4. I believe Volume 5 is also really beautiful. It's the more purpley neutral one. This has more pink and neutrals to it, but it's still really fun. It's definitely colorful, but I love the tones in here. You have a few fun pops of like fluorescent shades, but you also have some great neutrals, some softer tones. I love this sort of minty green shade. You do have one pressed glitter in here, which just won't get used by me. My eyes are very sensitive to glitter. If I get any glitter in my eyes, it will cause them to itch and water, and then I have to take my makeup off, so I don't use that. But oh, actually there's 2 glitters. These are both glitters, and they're pretty, but not likely to get used by me. Love this peachy shade right here. It is so pretty, as well as this sort of duochrome blue purple shade. There's a lot to be done with this palette, so I don't know. This might be a good candidate for 1 month, one palette, I think, maybe in the spring. Let me know what you guys think. But I do love this. I am glad that I purchased it. It has really nice textures in it. I definitely prefer it to a couple of the earlier volumes, specifically volume 2 and 3. I think we're lacking a little bit in the shimmer department in terms of the quality and consistency, but this one is really good. Number 5 is the only mini palette that I purchased this year, and it is the mini ZENDO palette from Natasha Denona. Goodness. I actually skipped over this when it was released initially. I don't know what stopped me from picking it up. I do love the color story, but then once I picked up the mid-size ZENDO palette, for some reason I just felt compelled to purchase this one, and I'm really glad that I did. I love this sort of deeper shimmery purple. You've got kind of a silvery color, as well as like a pinky rose goldy kind of a shade, and then 2 really beautiful mattes. And I really like this one, actually. It's become kind of a favorite over some of my other mini palettes from Natasha Denona, so I am really glad I picked that one up. And then speaking of Natasha Denona, the actual ZENDO palette comes in at number 4. You know, a lot of people didn't really care for this one. I like it. I think, you know, if you go into it with the mindset that you're going to get some of these like chroma crystals, super metallic, you know, things like that, you might be disappointed because that is not what this is. But for me, this ends up being a great everyday palette because there's little bits of color in here, but you'll also have some really beautiful neutrals as well. I absolutely adore this duochrome down here called Yama. It's sort of like a warm base with a little bit of a green reflect. And then this shade right here called Breath is just the most beautiful minty green. Looks great on the inner corner, great all over the lid. I just adore it. And to be honest, I ended up liking this palette a lot more than I thought I was going to when hubby picked it out in Vegas as a gift for me. So I'm really glad. I'm glad that I did go ahead and get this one. Sometimes I make myself wait on Natasha's releases because I can be a little bit of a completionist when it comes to her palettes. But I think I did a good job this year. There's definitely a couple of hers that I've skipped over. So ZENDO comes in at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is another Natasha Denona palette, and it is the Retro. I believe prior to the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz, this was my most recent purchase, and I am so thrilled that I did. I will link any related videos to any of these palettes down in the description box in case you want to see the reviews or the looks or what have you. But I had so much fun playing with this palette, and to me, this is what the Metropolis wasn't, and that is something that I feel inclined to reach for on a more everyday basis. You can get muted looks, but you can also get very glamorous looks. You can get deep looks. You can get soft looks, and you know, they're all sort of neutral-ish. Again, we have several cream to powder shades in here, which again are my favorites. I specifically love this shade Andy and this shade Vivian of the cream to powder shades. They don't look like anything special, but I assure you they are special. And then there's also 2 absolutely stunning sparkly shades in here right here. So there's a lot of fun to be had in this palette. Even if it does look sort of neutral, muted every day, there's definitely some fun to be had in here as well. So there are only 2 left, and coming in at number 2 is my BH Avocado Toast palette. Like I said, I did a full 1 month 1 palette with this, where I only used this palette in conjunction with my Project Pan eyeshadows, and I fell deeply in love with this palette, more than I ever thought I could, and that was what led me to turn 1 month 1 palette into an actual series. Again, I'm mid-month with the Jackie Aina palette right now, and admittedly struggling a little bit, but this is beautiful. And while there is some good greenness in here, there's also some great neutrals in here with which to build a look, to make this a little more versatile for the types of looks or the types of situations that you might use this palette. And it's just gorgeous. Avocado, lemon pepper, green juice, beautiful. They're just super shiny and wet looking, and you know, not just totally green, like primary green, army green, emerald green. There are those shades in here, but there's also a lot more. So I really love this palette. If I had to recommend one palette out of this entire roundup, it would probably be this one, even though it didn't come in at number 1. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, the number 1 palette, I don't think I've really used this on my channel at all, but it's not only about this specific palette, but it was more about discovering a formula that I wasn't familiar with. It kind of redeemed the brand for me overall, and it is the Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. I know so many people purchase this palette. I've seen so many amazing panning pictures over on Instagram of people panning this palette. So many beautiful pans, and I just love this. I think this is so beautiful. It's pastel, but you definitely have some depth to work with. There are duochromes, there's different textures. You have some more smooth metallics where others are more glittery, and I just think this is stunning. And I cannot wait to pair this with the Rose Quartz palette at some point. So let me know if you would like to see that. I just look at this palette and I melt. There are so many beautiful shades in here. You have Cosmic, Galaxy, Nebula. I mean, just look at those. This shade really gets me, and it looks like something that would go with or maybe even be present in the Rose Quartz palette. But I mean, how can you argue with those metallics? They're stunning. I love this matte formula, which is what surprised me. I have had a couple of her smaller 9-pan palettes, like the Obsession palettes, and I ultimately ended up getting rid of both of the ones that I've had. But in spite of that, I came upon the information that these larger palettes are actually made in Italy, which a lot of my favorite brands eyeshadows are made in Italy, and then the smaller palettes are made in China. And so it actually is a different formula, and I knew that from the moment I swatched this palette, that it was a completely different formula from her 9-pans. So in this way, my eyes have been open to these larger palettes, which is why I went ahead and jumped on the Rose Quartz as well. I'm not really interested in the Naughty palette or the New Nudes, but I definitely will be keeping my eyes out in the future for more palettes like this from Huda Beauty. And overall, Huda Beauty has just really come on the scene for me this year. You know, I have picked up the Huda Beauty Tantour this year. I have a little sample-y size of her baking powder, which I actually really like. So overall, Huda Beauty has come into my life this year and been redeemed over those little 9-pan obsessions that just really weren't any good, if I'm being honest, as a connoisseur of eyeshadow palettes. So there you go. Those are all the palettes that I tried in 2021. I have no plans to buy any more palettes before the end of the year. The only reason that would change is if Natasha Denona comes out with another palette and I have to have it. We'll see. But I'm really proud of myself for only purchasing 12 palettes this year. That was my goal, whether I said it on my channel or not. I didn't want to purchase more than one palette per month this year, and some months I bought more than one palette, but overall it evens out to one palette per month. So that's definitely something that I want to keep going in 2021. But again, let me know down below, like, how many palettes did you pick up this year? What is your favorite palette that you picked up this year? And were there any surprises in this video for you if you're familiar with my collection or me? But with all that said, thank you guys for hanging out with me, for being patient with my very tired brain. I love you all, and I hope if you found today's video entertaining that you will give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing before you leave so that I can see you in my next video, hopefully more awake. And I hope all of your makeup days are absolutely beautiful makeup days.